Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. We're going to talk a little bit about, or for the next hour, really, about Open Research Europe, the new-ish, I guess, open research publishing platform set up by the European Commission in collaboration with F1000 Research. So my name is Kelly Woods. I'm a senior associate publisher at F1000 that's responsible for looking after Open Research Europe. And I have with me here today a number of our community gateway advisors and researchers from different disciplines that have been involved in the platform since its launch, really, and some more recently. So we'll hear a little bit about their experiences from their different roles as contributors, and then we'll discuss a little bit what the next steps of the platform are. So I'll give a little bit of an introduction. And before I get started, just some housekeeping rules, or notices rather. By clicking the little red arrow at the top right-hand side of your screen here, you can hide this control panel so it's not blocking your view of our lovely faces. This arrow won't disappear, so it will remain just very, very small here in the side, so you can pull it back out if you need to ask a question or raise your hand. If you do have a question during any of the presentations, please feel free to type it into the question box, and Phil will make sure that it gets answered at the end, and we'll leave time for questions. We'll read it aloud and answer it at the end there. If there's any questions that do get left unanswered, I'll do my best to provide an answer to them and send it round along with the recording. So do make sure to be sending in your questions as we go through. So just a little bit of an introduction to everybody who's going to be speaking today. As I mentioned, I'm Kelly and I'm the Senior Associate Publisher at F1000. We also have with us today Dr. Thomas Susi, who's a physicist at the University of Vienna, who's joining us. He plays many roles on the platform, really, but I think today primarily speaking from a scientific advisory board capacity. We also have Dr. Katalin Solimosi. I should have checked the pronunciation of your last name before we went live, so please do correct me if I'm wrong. But Katalin is a plant biologist at Utrecht University. We have Dr. Emma Norris with us, who's a behavioral change researcher at Brunel University, as well as, and both Emma and Katalin are community gateway advisors on the platform, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that role is, as well as they can as well later on. And we also have Professor Paul Kearney with us, who's a politics or political science researcher based at Stirling University. And then finally, but last but not least, we have Dr. Johan Matthijs List, who's a linguistics researcher at Max Planck Institute. Having a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we won't be able to see his face, I'm afraid, but we will be able to hear him later on, so we can still hear all his thoughts. Okay, so I just wanted to give a little bit of background into the ambitions of Open Research Europe when it was launched. So the European Commission really wanted to lead by example in operationalizing open science principles within all areas of academic publishing, ensuring transparency and cost effectiveness with the publishing model that they had chosen. They wanted to explore different sustainable models of open access publishing and investigate a new sort of business model with Open Research Europe. But ultimately to provide a high quality and reliable and efficient publishing venue for their beneficiaries to publish at no cost to the author and with no cost to the reader as well. So I'll very briefly just go over the model and how it actually works, just in case anyone isn't already aware. So Open Research Europe does operate on a post-publication peer review model of publication. So the articles are submitted by our authors. They undergo a number of pre-publication checks by our in-house editorial team, making sure that they comply with all of our guidelines and policies and that they fit the article type guidelines as well. And we also make sure that the data has been deposited. So we do operate on a as open as possible but as closed as necessary open data policy. And just to highlight as well that all of our policies and our open data ones do comply with the latest Horizon Europe policy. So if you're publishing with Open Research Europe, you can rest assured that you're fully compliant with all of the requirements of your Horizon Europe grant. Once the paper has passed our pre-publication checks, it gets published online, and that's when we start the peer review process. So it already has a DOI, it's already shareable on the site, so you get really rapid access to the research. At that point, we start reaching out to the peer reviewers that have been suggested by the authors and invite them to submit their peer review on that paper. Once we have received at least either 2 approved statuses from those peer reviewers or 1 approved and 2 approved with reservation statuses, it's at that point that we would consider the article to have passed peer review, and we would start sending it to relevant indexers and repositories. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of how it works. There are a couple of webinars online already that go through this process in a lot more detail. So if you are interested to learn more, please look those up or just get in touch with me. But I did just want to give a very brief overview just in case anybody wasn't aware. Happy to take questions on that later as well. So moving on to the main focus of this webinar is to look at the major milestones that Open Research Europe has achieved so far over the last year and a bit. So we currently have as of last night, 214 publications on the site so far, with 108 of those having passed peer review. And these are from a wide collection of a wide variety rather of the article types that we offer on Open Research Europe, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We've also launched our community gateways and collection features on the site. So we currently have about 49 collections, I believe, and somewhere around 10 community gateways live on the site. And these are sort of thematic areas of the site. So if you're looking to find all of our content on cell biology, for example, you're going to be looking to Catalin's community gateway to find all of that content, or Emma's community gateway for the psychology content. So it just helps to create a hub on the site for all of these research around the same themes. We've also had some success with early indexation. So at the end of last year now, we were accepted in the DOAJ, which is the Directory of Open Access Journals, and we also received their seal of approval. And we were more recently accepted for indexation in InSpec as well, which is a key engineering and technology indexing database. So looking to get more, looking to be indexed in more places for the rest of this year going forwards. But these are 2 sort of early indexations that we've got. We also conducted an author survey at the end of last year and received very positive results from that, which we have also published a blog, which gives you a little bit more information about that. So check that out if you're interested. And we have quite a strong social media presence as well. And just to highlight again that we have received publications from across the broad scope of all the various disciplines that we cover on Open Research Europe, ranging from sort of, well, the scope that we have here today, we've got from physics to political science, so all the way from sort of natural sciences down to humanities and social sciences and everything in between. And overall, our articles have currently received over 15,000 total views and almost 4,000 total downloads. So we've definitely had a very successful first year, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our panel today about how they think it's gone as well. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to the panel. So I'll ask them all to speak for about 5 minutes, just introduce yourselves and talk about why you wanted to get involved with the platform. So I think I'll go to Toma first, if you don't mind.
Good, thank you, and hello everybody. Nice to have so many people join us, and also to all of the panelists and F1000 for organizing this. So yes, so I'm a professor of physics at the University of Vienna in Austria. My research is focused on these days very primarily on using electron microscopy to study materials, mostly 2-dimensional materials such as graphene and other of its family. And so my day job is really being a scientist, being an academic research professor. I of course do a little bit of teaching. I do other university duties, but my main focus is really day-to-day running a research group, finishing up on an ERC grant now, and so that allowed me great freedom to found a group and get my research started, and also to achieve a tenure position now recently here in Vienna. That's not primarily why I'm involved with ORE, Open Research Europe. My other kind of hobby, let's say professional hobby for about a decade, has been to participate in all kinds of debates and discussions around open access, open science. And I started back in my home country of Finland more than 10 years ago. And then more recently, I was working at the Young Academy of Europe in the board, and we were quite actively engaging on Plan S. And yeah, through these types of activities, I've, I guess, developed a bit of a profile on being an advocate and a person who is knowledgeable about open science. And that has gotten me invited in all sorts of places, and the scientific advisory board of Open Research Europe is being one of them. And I was quite keen to participate. My only reservation at the time was the fact that ideally I would have wished that the platform was based on open source technology and ideally owned by the community completely. But I tend to be pragmatic, and I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And in this case, you know, this is a platform for all Horizon funded research. The Commission is not a publisher. Obviously, they need people to do this for them. And for this to be able to handle, I mean, if open science becomes more of a mainstream thing, and I think we'll also talk about the assessment system later on, there may be a lot of people wanting to publish. So you need a very robust, technically very modern system that can handle a lot of submissions, and F1000 simply has a very good platform. So technology, there is nothing to doubt there. So yeah, I was eager to get involved because Open Research Europe is really, it's, as they like to say, open science in action. And it really supports more or less all of the bells and whistles, like starting from open data and open code, open peer review with open identities, all of these good things that we want to see in research to make sure that it's reproducible and actually usable by others as well. And in the scientific advisory board, I had the possibility to, you know, the platform was done, the contract to commission it was done. I wasn't involved in that, so I've been just involved in kind of providing a perspective from a researcher where we'd like the platform to go, and we were consulted on many things like different areas, how things should be divided to disciplines or different types of topics. And yeah, we've had some debates over the peer review model, and so it's a very active scientific board, and I think everybody there is quite convinced that this initiative is what we need in Europe and in science overall more broadly. And my experience thus on the board has been very good, but I'm also a published author. I published in the first batch of articles, a software tool article on a code, open source code, naturally, that we developed in Vienna. And there it's really nice because for this type of an article or let's say scientific output or research output, there are not a lot of good venues. Quite often you might just have the GitHub code that gets cited, or maybe some scientific article about a specific application of your code that includes the description, and then that gets cited. Here the advantage is that we can publish new versions of the article when we update our code. And so all the citations are kind of leading to the same place, and there's of course going to be a record of all the previous versions, and actually they are saved with a link to the archived code, so everything is kind of transparently done there. But we're coming up with a fairly big update soon. We're gonna bump up the version number of our code, and then we'll just write a revision, a new version of our article, and describe all the new features and get that re-reviewed on the same platform. So that's the really nice thing also about the modern way of kind of keeping all the versions available, but having the possibility to then let the output evolve as the research evolves. And so I'm very much looking forward to that, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Excellent, thank you, Tomer. I'll look forward to receiving the next version of your article soon then. Excellent, shall we pass over to Katalin now?
Yes, hi everyone. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm Katalin Solymosi, and a plant biologist of profession. And similarly to Toma, I'm also actively involved in teaching and research. So I've just launched my research group, and I'm an assistant professor at Sloran University Budapest in Hungary. And I'm also at the same time involved in the activity of several national or international early career researcher bodies. So the Young Academy of Europe, I'm actually recruitment vice chair of this organization, and I'm co-chair of the Hungarian Young Academy. And as already mentioned by Kelly, I'm quite recently appointed Community Gateway Advisor of Open Research Europe. So I still don't have too much experience with it from that side or from that point of view, but I'm representing, or I will be representing, or I'm involved in the community of cell biology research or related to cell biology research, because I'm also doing electron microscopic work on plant cells a lot. So, and I should, similarly to Toma, I also have some experience on the other side of the platform, because I'm an author, so I also have a paper published there with colleagues of the Young Academy of Europe. And again, I think it might be useful to mention that here again, it's about a kind of quite specific data that we have published there, because on summer 2020, we ran a survey with the Young Academy of Europe about the situation of early career researchers during the coronavirus pandemic. And this was a survey that we later on published last summer in Nature Careers. I mean, we wrote a kind of summarizing short paper. Well, it's not a real paper, it's rather a commentary. And Nature expected us to upload the data, the methodology that we followed, and how the survey questions were analyzed into a platform. So I'm not sure where else we could have published those kind of data, although I must add that I'm not so much, I'm not a sociologist, so I'm not doing many surveys. So maybe there are platforms that I don't know. So this is the place where we finally decided to upload all these supplementary materials, because that was requested also by Nature. And I had quite positive experience during the procedure. We provided the name of reviewers, and then finally we got this peer review. I really like the fact that the reviewers' names are listed, and that this is also an open procedure, so it's fully transparent, and the paper and these data can be used by the community for any further purposes. So so this was my experience with the platform so far, and why I think it's really important to advertise these kind of initiatives, because I think, and also the reason why I accepted to be invited here, because I have the impression that that researchers in Central and Eastern Europe are a little bit less aware of the open science platforms and possibilities, and we have not too much information on it, and so I really think it's important to make them aware of this kind of initiatives, and also to try to somehow start to lead. I mean, early career researchers, I think they should take a lead of open science initiatives, and follow and try to even shape how it will be finally implemented in Europe or all over the world, because it's really important, especially important for us and the future and the society. So that's for my part.
Excellent, thank you, Katalin. That was really interesting to hear from your your early career researcher angles that you look at there. Excellent. We'll pass over to Paul now, I think, if you don't mind.
Thank you. So I'm glad I heard those speakers, because it reminded me to say what I do. I hadn't written that down. So my name is Paul Kearney. So my title is Professor of Politics and Public Policy, University of Stirling in the UK. And so I do, I suppose I would see them, what I described as one topic, but it can be two disciplines. You know, political science can be, I guess, associated with, you know, things like election studies, you know, democracies and such like, whereas often, you know, lots of different scholars do policy type work. But there are, you know, there's political science approaches to policy studies, trying to explain how policy processes work and why policy changes and that sort of thing. So it's quite a broad remit. In terms of my involvement, I was an author first, so I've published 2 articles in Open Research Europe so far. They're both qualitative systematic reviews, you know, so these humdinging sized, my eyes lit up when I asked what's the word limit? You know, it's 20,000 words for these reviews plus bibliography. And if anyone's got an experience of trying to publish a review like that in another journal, normally it's 8,000, and you essentially, by the time you've explained what you're doing and why, and you know, what you've looked at and what the methods, you've almost got no space to actually describe what you were talking about. You know, what was the kind of the meat of it. So it's very attractive in that sense. And I'm a community gateway advisor. I suspect I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to explain to people what that means. But I think in a nutshell, it's 2 things. It's giving feedback on ideas that come from Open Research Europe, you know, what kind of themes they would talk about and, you know, who to approach, that sort of thing. And maybe trying to extol the benefits of the platform to others. And I think in the context of, I think it will take a while for the site to go from being a place for early adopters to be, you know, to get towards a kind of routine place for submission. So I think my part would be to try and encourage that change. In terms of why I got involved, so I saw the potential. I mean, obviously the first answer is I have relevant funding, you know, from the Research Council. You know, I think that's the first thing to say, isn't it? I think, for being honest, that's probably the driver for most people. You know, you have the funding, it puts certain responsibilities on you to release your work in a particular way, and so this site fulfills those requirements. So, but apart from that, I saw the potential for non-traditional work. You know, so the example I described, I couldn't really think of where I could publish those reviews, except perhaps in a short book, and that presents all sorts of problems with open access. Not least the expense. You know, to publish an open access book, it's between 6,000 and 12,000 euros or something like that. So, you know, there's a kind of, and it's much slower. And then I had some good initial experiences. First with the systematic review, and second, more recently with, I mean, I think all academics will have their own horror story about sending a paper to a traditional journal, waiting perhaps a year or so to get a first decision. And if it's not a good decision, you could be talking about 18 months, 2 years. So I've actually, without saying too much, I've actually just had a good experience trying to save a paper from that fate with Open Research Europe, and I kind of regret not doing it in the first place. In terms of each time, I think one of the benefits is if the work you're doing is timely, you know, I'd say particularly is policy relevant, and you don't want to wait for a year before anyone can see it, then the preprint side of it is very useful. And I guess I'm keen to experiment more. I think the next thing we're about to do with colleagues is produce an essay that tries to bring together a lot of things we've said. And the benefit there, I think, is that particularly if you're looking at policy relevance, policymakers are looking for synthesis. They're not necessarily looking for novelty. So I'm thinking, you know, if someone from the Commission wants to read this stuff, they're more likely to read something that tries to sum up kind of state of the art rather than tries to say, you know, one particularly new thing. Okay. Then I think I'll experiment again with that idea of updating things, particularly, so one of our papers, we might do workshops with practitioners, we'll gain feedback, and then maybe that would feed into a paper. And you can't do that one with a kind of, you know, fixed DOI. Okay, so I'll stop there. I have more to say about it.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. Emma?
Hi everyone, and thanks again for the invite to this today. So I'm Dr. Emma Norris. I'm a lecturer in public health at Brunel University in London. I primarily research and teach around health psychology and health behaviour change. And so my research is a lot about how we can design and evaluate interventions to improve health behaviours like vaccine uptake, physical activity, diet, smoking, these types of behaviours. I've set up a health behaviour change research group at the university, but alongside all this, in like the recent kind of 5 years or so, I've become really invested and passionate about promoting open science within my own university and own discipline as well. And this is like an area also that my research is going to now. So how we can use behaviour change theory to develop interventions to promote open science itself across career stages and across disciplines. So this is increasingly something that I'm really, really interested in. And so I think partially that's kind of why I was approached to be involved in this really great initiative quite recently. So I've only had the role for the last couple of months, but getting stuck in already. So also I chair the European Health Psychology Society's Open Science Special Interest Group. Long title. But as part of my role as a community gateway advisor for psychology, obviously psychology with all of these disciplines is really broad, and so I do this alongside my colleague Dr. Kate Clark, who's at the University of West of England, who has more of a kind of a cognitive and neuroscience background. So we kind of share the role together, which is really good because she can handle different types of papers and knows and has different connections to me, more on the health psychology and social psychology side. So it's quite good to have that collaboration to do the role as best as possible. In terms of why I was keen to get involved, many reasons, but I guess from a personal experience of having published in my postdoctoral and my current role within Wellcome Open Research, as I was a postdoc on a Wellcome funded project for about 3.5 years, which uses the same F1000 platform effectively as Open Research Europe. So I really saw the benefits of publishing in this way, in terms of getting really the most detailed peer reviews I've ever had, like really constructive, with really world-leading peer reviewers accepting the invite to review these papers, which is something that I did not expect, and it really, really improved the quality of the subsequent paper as well. Also, it enabled us to build a small collection of papers from our own projects and have them all in one place, rather than having, you know, different journals with different papers and it being a bit difficult to find out where all the outputs are. Having it all in one venue was really beneficial as well. And also with all the, you know, the extra benefits of really pushing open data, open materials and so on, which is very important, I guess, from a psychology perspective, to have the materials, the questionnaires and things like this that you're using all available and pushed as well alongside the paper. And, you know, also having this post-publication peer review model means that you don't have to, you know, worry about having a preprint or publishing that somewhere else. It's all in one place, so you can see the evolution of the paper yourself as an author, but also the reader can see that as well, and how it's improved with peer review. So I really think it emphasizes the value of good quality peer review, which is really good, and we're moving towards more of an open peer review model in that respect. So as I say, I am still quite new to the role, but already we've kind of got stuck in with organising a kind of collection around experimental psychology and cognitive neuroscience, so bringing together those papers into one place, and to continue doing that going forward as well. And also we're also just thinking about how to, you know, better structure psychology as a kind of broad area into the subdisciplines that it best represents. So yeah, I think that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Mattis, if we hand over to you.
Okay, so you can hear me now, I guess, yeah?
We can hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I tried all kinds of versions. So I've tried several versions of the Google Chrome and Firefox, but I can only join with, so that you can hear me. I'm very sorry for that. Well, my first encounter with Open Research Europe was that I received the email invitation that there's this new journal, and I was really keen on testing it. And I had a situation where I specifically needed something where I have my paper out quickly. It is also in good quality. I didn't want to have a simple preprint like these preprint servers, but I just wanted to really have a good discussion. And it was a very nice research experience, specifically because all these aspects that are important for my research. I'm a linguist who's working with computational approaches in order to study the evolution of the languages using methods from biology, bioinformatics, also computational linguistics. And so data is important for what we're doing. Methods are important, versions are important because we program a lot. All things seem to be supported here because you have versions of the papers, specifically in the open peer review, because that is something that you can use in order to get people to behave. Given that linguistics is an old discipline or an archaic, let's say a discipline that is 200 years old, with many proud people who have been working in philology, in these kinds, we have an environment that sometimes reminds of the 90s, where you have reviews that will just be really devastating and saying that this paper should never see the light of publication, etc. So people are very vicious. So I think the only way to really handle this is to get the reviews out so that people see whether people really behave and stay polite. And as long as there's no misconduct in research, specifically in topics like linguistics, where we don't have the yes/no answers to the questions, we should also leave people to publish their papers and their views on certain topics. We don't have this black-white, yes, false attitude. And so this was, what was really important was to have this good support, specifically also seeing the papers nicely in print, nothing disturbed there. Usually I had publishing houses, like bad experience with some publishers who would just get my figures all downscaled that you couldn't see anything anymore, and then the paper went already out to print. So all of this didn't happen. So and I was thinking like, well, that is actually a nice way of also exploring some new, specifically these articles that might not be that are important for our discipline, but maybe they are not the ones that I would send to Science or Nature. Specifically these borderline topics, and no, not borderline topics, but the more like the basic research that we are doing, where we want to have the discussions then also with people from our field, where I really appreciate good feedback, and they may be important and may have an impact, but they don't have an impact that they are completely out for that I go through this 2-year process, that I write something very spectacular and that I get a science publication and become famous. So this is not to say that there is not a potential maybe for the future that there could also be articles of high impact, but what I would actually hope for. But specifically having these like basic principles of science that are dear to me, seeing them enabled in such a journal, that was something that was really important.
Excellent, thank you so much. So for the second part, I just wanted to delve in a little bit to some of the points that were raised here. So I think maybe we can go back to Paul first, if that's okay. And we mentioned how we've had a lot of submissions over the course of the last year in all the different article types that we offer. Would you like to speak a little bit about sort of why that's important? We've heard a little bit already, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so I kind of scroll through the list. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I guess most people in my field, I think they would have in mind maybe 2 or 3 types that are available to them. One would be a sort of traditional research article. Those would be the ones that they would do most for recognition, for example. Then there would be sort of commentary type articles that would be more discursive and more likely to be read, if I'm honest. So the scientific ones are narrow, relatively technical, whereas commentary ones more likely to be read and discussed. And then there can be short notes and that sort of thing, very short commentaries on, here's a particular method we've done, or here is a protocol or something like that. And I think, those 2 latter ones, I think, are where I would see the most flexible in terms of going to ORE. Essentially, I would say the more preliminary the work, or the more ongoing the work, the more flexible this platform would be, compared to thinking of publication as like a one big bang event at the end. So I think that's like the theme. And so the range, so we did a sort of, a systematic review type one, really big one. There are essays that could be smaller, but I noticed they can be 20,000 words, so we'll see how that one goes. Case studies, I guess, would be, again, if you try and submit a case study on its own to a lot of traditional policy journals, they'll say, well, okay, we'll need 4,000 words on the theory first. And they want it integrated, and they want the case study to speak to a wider body of work. And sometimes I think you just want to publish things as you go, and then put them all together. And I think that's probably the thing. Often we would see an article as the full collection, whereas if it's a site, it can be a collection of smaller things that build up. And that can include things like brief reports, things on the methods, things on data. So I think it could be that someone's thinking. I often think this way. I have this publishing project, and there's a whole bunch of things I want to do that are part of it. And if you try and put them all in one article, there's no space for them, and you have to make compromises. And this is, I think, a way of essentially spreading out. I mean, I guess there are some downsides. If there are no limits to what you do, no word limits, then maybe you don't have the same discipline. But I don't think that would happen. I think that would be just it's much more open, more flexible. And I guess that would be quite a convenient process. I mean, I suppose the only thing to say about that in terms of qualifying it, in terms of the difference with like a wider preprint site, is I think there's some trade-off because when it goes on here, you essentially don't just upload it as if it's your own website. It goes through a process where essentially it's quality checked, and there are some fiddly things that you won't enjoy doing, but I think the benefit is there when it comes out, because it looks like it doesn't look preliminary. And I think that's been, I think, important during things like COVID, where essentially anyone could put something up without it being checked by anyone. And I think that's not what this site is about. I think this is a bit more quality control.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's a really important point, actually. One of the main aims that the European Commission had when launching this platform was to sort of remove any research waste. And like you say, if you're trying to squeeze everything that you've done over the course of the last few years into one research article, that there's going to be bits that possibly don't fit into that story and then maybe never see the light of day. So we definitely don't want to do that, and hopefully we provide a variety of article types where you might be able to publish that little bit that got left out of the main research article there. So Toma, we mentioned briefly at the beginning about the reform that's happening at the minute around research assessment. How does that sort of play into Open Research Europe, and how important do you think that's going to be for us going forwards?
Yeah, as many of us know, and as many of the listeners probably know, there's now quite a lot of, let's say, enthusiasm and really a drive to finally reform how we assess research and researchers. And for people outside of academia, it may come as a shock how this is currently done, which is that we basically look at the name of the journal where a piece of research is published, and we give it value based on that. And there's a whole hierarchy of these brands that is called impact factors, which are then numbers that are actually easy to game and are being gamed by various publishers. And it's a system whose flaws have been apparent for anybody who's been looking for decades, and one can find arguments against this from the very start of the founding of impact factors, and actually the librarian who came up with them never meant them to be misused in this way. And finally, but the problem is that it's a systemic issue, and it's a issue where there's a big first mover problem. So as an individual researcher, I may be very idealistic, and I might want to publish in the most open way, full open data and open peer review and the most modern ways of doing open science, but I may not be able to get a job in many places unless I have publications in really prestigious journals, which some of them have very good practices. I don't say that, but still the existence of this journal hierarchy is definitely a big problem in many ways, because it undervalues different kinds of contributions. It encourages, even in some cases when you have extremely hard career prospects in many countries is really difficult to have an academic job, then of course individuals may be tempted to cut corners or even do fraud, because they're under so enormous pressure to publish in these very selective journals. And so the problem is clear. What hasn't been clear is what do we do instead, and how do we achieve this systemic change that is necessary to change the system. And that is now thanks to a very active initiative from the European Commission, but also many research funders. And actually, I've been participating in this process, and I'm heartened to see that leaders from university networks are also very aware of these problems and also eager to change this system. And so what would that mean for Open Research Europe? I mean, I'll be very honest, even though I support it fully, I would not currently, for my career, I would not send my very best work to Open Research Europe, because it wouldn't give me a career payoff in the same way as a paper in Nature or Science would. I have tenure now, but then I have PhD students and postdocs, and I have to be mindful of their careers. And so we really need to change the incentive structure, and we need to do that through a systemic and really broad coalition of actors coming together to do that, and that hopefully is happening. And if and when that succeeds, then hopefully, I mean, mindsets will take longer time to change. Let's be realistic about it. It will maybe take a generation before the prestige associated with certain brands goes away, and maybe Nature is prestigious for good reasons as well. And maybe we will always continue to want to publish there, but then we won't be ranking journals based on this arbitrary number. And oh, this journal has a higher number, let's publish there. And Open Research Europe has said that they will not get an impact factor. They will refuse it, and I think that's the way to go. And so if that kind of very harsh realities of career worries that goes away, I think then people can just decide, oh, what is the best venue for my work? Do I need a open review? Like many of us shared the good advantages of the system where you can have open review and fast publication and versions and so on. Then maybe we can actually have publishers that compete on services, who provides the best service for the most affordable price. That would be actually a functioning market, which we currently don't have. And I think in such a world, platforms like Open Research Europe would be much more attractive to many more authors, rather than just people who want to support them for idealistic reasons. And of course, we should align incentives with what we want for science. We want science to be robust. We want science to be transparent. So let's reward people for doing science in that way. And that's the broader assessment reform that is now hopefully finally happening.
There's definitely a lot of momentum in this area at the minute, and I feel like change is coming. But like you said, I think the mindsets will possibly take quite a bit longer to follow that. It was really important what you said about the journal impact factor and not judging the article based on the venue of publication. So I think there's definitely more that we can do on Open Research Europe to highlight the article level metrics that we have and improve those that we offer on the article. So with that in mind, and that might be something that one of you was going to say, so I apologize if I've pinched that, but is there anything else that any of you and the audience as well are really interested to see on Open Research Europe or would like to see in the future of the platform going forwards? Go for it.
Well, I was just talking, but I do have something that actually occurred to me during this call, so I haven't talked to anybody at ORE about this before. But I think at least in our field and increasingly many fields, there's a big part of trying to make science more reproducible is to use computational notebooks like the Jupyter notebook, where you can actually reproduce all the analysis done for a paper by providing the data, and then you have all the calculations and whatever code has been applied. It would be amazing if we could have that online on Open Research Europe. Have a browser window embed where we could run Jupyter notebook and allow the reader even to maybe tweak the values or change and export the data in that way. I think that would be truly amazing for reproducibility and very convenient for the authors and readers. But yeah, I don't know about the technical side of that, of course. So, but I think that's something I hope somebody will do in the future, because it's, at least in our field, becoming more and more prominent, and everything is moving to Python in a way. And yeah, that's a convenient common language where we can do quite transparent and reproducible science, like take it one step further.
As a very enthusiastic, almost only Python programmer, I want to jump in there. There has been a study that has been showing that notebooks are not the best way, so many have not been reproducible. But I think Python specifically is one of the most reproducible languages at the moment, with the possibilities that we have, that you can have all your packages and versions, you have a good package management system, etc. And it's now no deal. 10 years ago, it was different, quite different situation, that you get a package online, but now everything can be done in packages. So what we do in our research, also in my research group, is actually that we always try to really get this reproducibility done. And we are usually quite proud that the code has been working for years now and works also on all different platforms. So I think setting up a Jupyter notebook on the journal might be maybe too much on the one hand, because it costs too many resources. And then I'm actually not a fan of notebooks, because often I found that people fail to give actually all the versions of the software they use, and then it breaks. But this is also because in the field in which I work is computational linguistics, where there's lots of gold digging, like this atmosphere where people think that they can do lots of coding, but they do not look at replicability. And this is an annoyance. So you use code and you see, oh, I need that version from 2 years ago, and it has been pasted somewhere. And so the notebook aspect would mask the fact that it's not replicable, but it would look replicable on one system. But apart from that, emphasizing this aspect of replicability would be something that is also very dear to me, if it would be, because there's so many research studies that are not replicable, and they make it also into the big journals, and no checks are being done. And this is something also that the broad audience doesn't know about. I was like following in the pandemic all these issues about science, where they said, like, listen to the scientists, but if you then actually know the scientists and they are next door and you have listened to them, then actually it's something that is really scary at times, upon which models or which code research is based. It's like you go to a restaurant and have seen the kitchen, then you don't want to eat there anymore. And if we could find ways along these lines of rapidly, we're making case studies, making specific checks, maybe reviewers who would check the code specifically, run them on their systems, or have a broad system where the code is actually being run. That would be really great, and it would be, I think, should be the future of science.
Yeah, maybe instead of just a pure notebook, it could be a containerized environment with all the installed version numbers that's saved there, and then. But I find the interface where you can actually modify the code and run and see the plots. I find that really intuitive to work with.
Yeah, that's very attractive. Yes.
Yeah, my reviewers actually did run our code and did test it out, so it does happen on ORE.
One benefit of having to provide a code, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it was a software tool article, so it was kind of central to it. But maybe there could be a collection of just reproduction studies of maybe across all fields, and that could be something that would be highlighted on the platform.
Possibly. I feel like this is an issue that perhaps Toma and Mattis, we should get together and chat about another time in a lot more detail. Phil, have we had many questions from the audience that we'd like to start addressing?
Yes, we have. So our first question is, how are reviewers selected?
I'm happy to take that one, I guess. So we do operate on an author-led model of peer review at Open Research Europe. So those of you on the panel that have authored with us before will be aware that you were asked to provide suggestions of people that you think would be well suited to review that article. Our team of editors internally will then go through and conduct a series of conflict of interest checks on those suggested reviewers to make sure that they have the required level of expertise, that you haven't co-authored with them recently, you're not based at the same institution, trying to rule out as many of these conflict of interest issues as possible before we reach out to them and ask them if they'd be interested to review. I don't know if anybody would be interested to speak to their experiences of having to provide their reviewers. It was a question that we asked in our author survey, whether people were happy with that and whether they thought it slowed the process down, and actually they found the opposite, and that it actually led to a more constructive review process, and that they felt very confident that the reviewers they ended up having had the correct expertise that they needed. But if anyone else wants to jump in and speak to their experiences.
I mean, I can speak briefly just on my experiences of being an author, but work on open research, but it uses the same model. I personally found that it really depends on what you're publishing and how, I guess, your research team are connected in the field and how big that field is. So because we were publishing with really well-known authors in the field and who had published with so many other people, that made their selection process of who would be a suitable peer reviewer a little bit more difficult, I'd say, for us at the beginning to flag a sufficient number of people. But when we had those people, the peer reviews were fantastic, as I've said before. So, but I guess if you're coming from more of a potentially like maybe more early career person or someone else who's submitting in a broader field, the process of identifying reviewers would be a lot easier, I think. Yeah.
I could maybe just add that. I mean, I think that has to go with open review. Like the fact that the identities and the reviews are both open is what guarantees the integrity in the end, and actually guarantees that to a better extent than some forms of, or many instances of closed review, where the reader has no way of knowing who reviewed the paper and how thoroughly it was evaluated. And so those two go hand in hand. You couldn't have one without the other. And yeah, I did suggest reviewers also, of course, for my paper, and the team checks that I didn't have any conflicts of interest in the same way as you would in a regular journal. And we've all heard of instances where people get their own papers reviewed in the traditional system because some email address went to the wrong place, and there's been actually fraud done where people have manipulated the process by putting in fake email addresses that then lead to them, and they give their own papers glowing reviews. And yeah, so there are many problems in peer review as it's currently traditionally done. So I think the open system, even when the authors can propose these people, yeah, scientists tend to be critical. If they find something to be wrong with the paper, even if they know the person, I think they will point it out, maybe more politely than in a closed system, but I think the criticism will still be there.
I would hope more politely. Let's see. Next question, Bill.
So the next question, I think we've touched on this already a little bit, but I'll read it out. If someone had in their hands a nice typical manuscript, why would they choose ORE over a recognized journal?
Does anyone want to jump in on that point?
I suppose I wonder if underlying the question is, why would I send it here rather than a more respected journal? I mean, I think if that's the question, it's a hard one to answer right now because the odds are kind of stacked against the open one. I think it'd be something else. I mean, for some people, I think they're committed to open access and they just think it's more attractive and they kind of balk at the cost of the gold open access, for example. Something like that. If it's a traditional journal, it's quicker. You'll see it out more quickly, even when it's processed. There are pros and cons of the open access side of it, which I don't think we'll have time to talk about. But if you're committed to open review, then you'll get that kind of process here. And I suppose I was looking at other, wider things. There are other open access journals that are good and they have special themes and that sort of thing, but they have the fee at the end of it, and I think that just rules out lots of people. I mean, ORE rules out people for different reasons, but that rules them out for cost. I suppose the other thing I was thinking about, a question about what would we want to see. I wonder if this site would be an alternative to the edited book in the future. So that's often people in my field will think, we have this project, it needs to be interdisciplinary, we'll get each person to contribute a chapter and we'll do a start and end. And what tends to happen is they're often quite incoherent, and they end up as handbooks that are only bought by libraries for €200 or something like that. So I think it could be that's something that's more attractive. But I think in each of these, there's an element of a leap of faith here, where maybe the answer is you should just go with the traditional one. But there are these benefits that you might not anticipate from the early adoption.
Thank you. If no one else wants to jump in, yeah, go ahead.
I would like to, I think each topic has its perfect journal where it should be published. There are certain things that might really be interesting for a broad audience, and then it's a good idea to try and publish them with the big journals. And one gets also some reputation for this whenever one thinks about this. But there are also some journals that are really targeted. There's, for example, a journal for open source software where they do all the checking of the software on GitHub. There is a journal, in our cases, they are a journal for specific linguistic topics that we are interested in. They are also open access, and sometimes they have a no fee involved model, so they are completely run by the community. There are certain possibilities, so there are lots of possibilities that we have. So I think the reason is one should really think about when publishing with a journal is whether this article, where it fits best and what the journal offers. So reasons why Open Research Europe is attractive, I think, are these specific article types that are not offered by any other journal at the moment, because they were like not in the attention or main attention, which was like considered something like not that important, although there is a real definite need for it. Maybe there are also other aspects, and this will also depend on the way in which Open Research Europe will move in the future. So it gets more known. Journalists will also start reading it in order to search for some interesting articles they could feature there. Then it might even be a competitor of the bigger journals in some sense, but that is something that we cannot tell at the moment. But I think it's always individual. The article actually has a perfect journal to be submitted to usually, but maybe that's a little bit romantic in thinking about. But I try to actually really look at, this is a nice journal for this topic that I want to publish. And actually, I like this in having something like a bucket list of journals I want to publish. And these are not the best journals sometimes one would consider, but more like really so nicely done for this topic.
If I can just talk about one more aspect, it's the costs of publication. So if you have a Horizon project, you can publish your data here, and especially for early career researchers who might have international collaborations, but who, for example, talking about my own experience. So I've spent 6 years on maternity leave with my 2 kids, and I published 30 papers, or I wrote 30 papers during that period, but I had no resources to publish, but I was involved in international collaborations. So, well, that might be one more important point, that you can indeed publish your data the most open way possible without all kind of open access fees associated to it, or
Excellent, thank you. I can't help be very impressed that you managed to write 30 papers whilst you were at home with your child. That's insane. I love it. Thank you for that. I think we probably have time for one more question, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there any plans for other funders in the EU being able to join ORE?
Yeah, so this is a question that we get quite a lot. So the current contract that F1000 has with the European Commission to run Open Research Europe is until 2024. There's not any plans at this point in time to introduce additional funders as part of that framework agreement, but it's definitely something that is under consideration for future iterations of the platform. So just to be clear as well, the European Commission has guaranteed that funding for Open Research Europe will continue past this framework agreement with F1000, and the platform will continue to run without any disruption in between. So it won't disappear and then come back online. It will always remain. And it's highly likely, or it's definitely under consideration that would be the option for other funders to join potentially in the future, if that's something they would be interested to do, which I think it's definitely something researchers would like to see. So I would like to see that from the funders in return as well.
Yeah, we've definitely discussed this in the scientific advisory board, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think the Commission thinks probably that it makes sense. So yeah, how to do that in practice and when is the bigger question, but there's definitely talks underway.
And I think that rounds us up. So if there was, like I said, I think how many questions are left, Phil? Quite a lot of questions. Okay,
Yeah, there's
I'll
quite
do
a
my
few.
best. I'll do my best to answer as many of the questions as possible and send them round to everybody along with the recording. But otherwise, firstly, thank you so much to all of our panelists. It's been a really insightful conversation today, and I hope the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. And thank you to the audience for attending and submitting all these lovely questions, which I will endeavour to answer as best I can. So thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day and a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.